Today, we're not just talking about the world's most infamous serial killers. Oh no, that would be far too easy. Instead, we'll be exploring their lesser-known doppelgangers. Twisted souls who unfortunately didn't have much of a marketing budget, but pretty much modus operandi the exact same way as some of the world's most evil serial killers. You'd think they studied a Skillshare course taught by them. A little warning before we proceed. Viewers' discretion is advised. This video contains words that might come across as nonsensical, as we somehow live in a world that's so sensitive you can't call anyone fat anymore. So, for the sake of avoiding getting demonetized by good old daddy YouTube, moving forward, we'll be using stupid terms like unalived or pew-pew. Shout out Ray William Johnson. Meet the B1 Butcher, or the Comus Ripper, who was Namibia's most prolific serial unaliver. And like Jack the Ripper, his identity remains unknown to this day. Jack the Ripper, who I shall now refer to as Jack the Pimper, is the name of an unidentified serial unaliver who unalived ladies of the night and removed their insides around the poverty-stricken Whitechapel district of London in 1888. The alter ego Jack the Pimper was coined in a letter to newspapers penned by someone claiming to be the psychopath. You could say he had the Kim Kardashian kind of hunger for fame, just that he was camera shy, and due to the unavailability of X aka Twitter, in those days shit couldn't go viral unless you tweeted to the papers, mate. Life in the 1800s really #sucked balls. The B1 Butcher's name comes from the fact that he threw the body parts of his victims along Namibia's B1 highway because his mother didn't teach him how to use a trash can. One of the other things he adopted from Uncle Jack is selecting ladies of the night as his victims, and unaliving only 5 of them between 2005 and 2007. One suspect was unsuccessfully linked to the murders, German-born Namibian citizen Heinz Knierim, and no, he is not related to anyone who was in the Nazi party. Luis Alfredo Garavito Cubillos was often described as the world's worst serial unaliver. He was nicknamed after a character from the X-Men. The only clue we are prepared to give you is blue, so you have a beastly amount of guesswork ahead of you. Garavito was a predator, plain and simple. Over 300 victims, mostly children, were lured, tortured and unalived by this monster. His MO was chilling in its efficiency, luring kids with promises, then unleashing unspeakable horrors upon them. If serial unaliving were an Olympic sport, Garavito would have taken home the gold, silver, bronze, and his idea of an Olympics opening would have been much lamer than the shit we saw at the Paris Olympics, bro. Luis is on record for essaying and unaliving over 140 children, young boys aged between 6 and 16 years of age, mostly kids who lived in the street or were poor in one way or the other. The lesser-known version of Luis is Ramadan Abdel Rahim Mansour from Egypt. With all those pyramids, you think he'd become a grave robber instead, but no, just like Luis, he resorted to unaliving. Okay, I'll be damned if I have to use that word one more time. Mansour, unlike Luis, wasn't content with just the final act. He had to add a bit of theatricality to his crimes. Known as Al-Turbini, or the express train, Mansour was Egypt's own twisted conductor. He preyed on homeless boys, essaying and doing you-know-what before them, before tossing their corpses off moving trains or rooftops. It was unaliving with a side of sadistic showmanship, proving that some people just can't resist a bit of drama. Garavito was about sheer numbers, while Mansour preferred a more theatrical touch. But both left behind a legacy of terror that haunts their respective countries to this day. If there's an afterlife, these two are probably comparing notes on how to improve their craft. Okay, that's it. Moving forward. No more use of that petty word unalived. Sorry, YouTube, kiss my brass. With all the cute little anime characters made in Japan, you'd never think that such a country would be home to any kind of killer, except Pikachu, of course, because Pokemon killed anime. Miyuki Ishikawa is the Japanese version of Amelia Dyer, a British woman who is believed to have taken the lives of over 300 infants. The two turned childcare into something more closely resembling a horror show. Miyuki Ishikawa, the midwife who decided that some babies were better off not being born at all, and Amelia Dyer, the baby farmer who took unwanted infants and made sure they were permanently unwanted. Both of them were midwives who truly believed they were justified in committing the gruesome acts. Miyuki took the lives of babies whose parents who she deemed too poor to raise any children. Her method? Simple neglect, starvation, lack of care. She let nature take its grim course. She believed she was saving little future anime fans from poverty. As long as their parents couldn't afford a Netflix subscription, their baby wasn't allowed to live. With an estimated victim count of between 85 and 169, in similar fashion to Amelia, Miyuki found a way to monetize her evil. She and her hubby Takeshi would tell the parents, "Konnichiwa, you know what? Instead of saving up college money for your baby, why not give us a third of that and we'll get rid of the baby altogether?" Think of her as a grim accountant, tallying up lives and plenty of yen. They were aided in their evil schemes by Shiro Nakayama, who falsified death certificates on their behalf. Who wants to bet that some idiot is going to make an anime out of this and call it Attack on Toddler? We all want to be the first at something, even if it means becoming the first serial, you know what. Which brings us to H. Holmes, America's first celebrity serial, you know what. The man took home improvement to a whole new level with his murder castle, a labyrinth of horror, where guests checked in, but never checked out. Holmes was a showman, a con man, and a psychopath with a penchant for turning death into an art form. His victims? An assortment of tourists, employees, and anyone foolish enough to trust him. It was like the world's deadliest Airbnb, where instead of complimentary breakfast, you got a one-way ticket to the afterlife. Holmes built an entire hotel just so he could do you-know-what in it during the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago. That would be like Trump getting illegal immigrants to build a hotel so he can use it to become a billionaire, then somehow use both those things to become president. Wait. He already did that? Anywho, Holmes's castle had numerous torture rooms where he tortured and did you know what to his victims. And then we have Leonard Lake, the DIY enthusiast who turned his Californian cabin into a nightmare of epic proportions. Where Holmes was all about theatrics, Lake preferred a more intimate approach. He lured his victims with false promises, then dragged them into his soundproof bunker, a DIY dungeon that would make even the most hardened life-taker blush. His victims were tortured and you-know-whatted in ways that would have made Holmes proud, if not slightly envious. Holmes was the master architect of taking lives. Lake was the grim handyman. Both men took pride in their work, each creating their own personal hellscapes to fulfill their darkest desires. But where Holmes saw his victims as mere pawns in his grand game, Lake treated them like projects. Sick, twisted projects. A match made in hell, wouldn't you say? Leonard Lake, just like Holmes, built an abode that was meant for torture, and you-know-whatting while recording all of it. Except his was just a fortified bunker, presumably because he wasn't as ambitious as old AH. And finally, the part that all you twisted bastards have been waiting for. The part that made you salivate and anticipate because of an epic and genius thumbnail. Ted Bundy, America's poster boy for charming psychopaths, versus Moses Sitole, South Africa's very own ABC murderer. If these two ever met, it'd be like looking in a very twisted mirror. Moses Sitole was nicknamed the ABC murderer, or the Gauteng you-know-whatter, because, you guessed it, there was a major shortage of cool cereal, you-know-what nicknames in apartheid South Africa. Apart from that, criminologists likened him with Ted Bundy, seeing as they had a shitload, or as they say in South Africa, a cackload in common. From daddy issues to watching too much Fresh and Fit / Andrew Tate issues, both had a similar MO. Moses, described by many as a charming and handsome man, would approach his victims with false job promises. "Hey, would you like a job, young lady? But the catch is I have to take your life for you to get it." Just like every other serial, you know what? Sitole had a myriad of excuses for being who he was. He was arrested for assailing a girl in his teens, and blamed that for turning him into a murderer. So he came out and thought, now that I'm out, what can I do to get me back not only in prison but possibly on death row as well? I'm sorry, dude, but isn't prison supposed to rehabilitate your pervy ass? This is what happens when all your mentorship comes from a Tupac album. He deceived colleagues by appearing mild-mannered. You know, like if Clark Kent was Super Serial Killing Man instead of an actual hero. Using an organisation he managed, Youth Against Human Abuse, Sitole would approach women with job offers. He would then take them to a remote area and do the unimaginable. As if that wasn't enough, he would inscribe the B word on their bodies before disposing of them. Again, this is what happens when all your mentorship is from a Tupac album. If you've come along this far, you might as well unalive the like button and subscribe, just so I can feel better for having to Ray William Johnson my way through this video I did for you, YouTube binge watcher.